Ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully. Life is not a series of accidents. It is a journey of divine purpose. Everything God does is intentional. When He is about to shift you, elevate you, and entrust you with something greater, there are signs, there are indicators that something big is on the horizon. And if you don't recognize them, you might misinterpret the process and abort the promise. There are 7 things you will experience when God is preparing to release something great into your life. Let's walk through them. Number 1 thing, unusual disruptions in your life. Number 2, a stronger sense of restlessness. Number 3, increased resistance and opposition. Number 4, uncommon divine connections. Number 5, a new level of faith is required. Number 6, supernatural provision. And last, number 7, is a season of testing. Life is full of seasons, and every season has a purpose. Nothing happens by accident. When God is about to move you into something greater, He begins with a disruption. He shakes things up. He removes the things that are no longer serving your future. And if you don't understand this process, you might mistake divine disruption for a setback. But I want you to hear me clearly. When things in your life start shifting unexpectedly, don't panic. It is often the clearest sign that God is preparing you for something bigger. There are times in life when everything seems to be going well, and then suddenly things start falling apart. Opportunities dry up. Relationships change. The places and people you were comfortable with no longer feel the same. It may look like rejection, but it is actually redirection. You must understand that God never subtracts without the intention to add. He never removes something unless He is making room for something greater. But the problem is most people fight the disruption. They try to hold on to what God is shaking loose. They beg to stay in places where their season has expired. They cling to relationships that God is calling them to release. And in doing so, they delay the very thing they have been praying for. Look at the life of Joseph. He was comfortable in his father's house, favored and loved. But when God had something greater for him, a position of leadership that would save nations, his life was suddenly disrupted. He was betrayed, sold into slavery, and falsely accused. Everything that seemed stable was stripped away. If Joseph had judged God by his circumstances, he would have thought he was cursed. But what looked like a disaster was actually divine repositioning. Every painful event was pushing him closer to his destiny. If his brothers had never betrayed him, he would have never entered Egypt. If he had never entered Egypt, he would have never met Pharaoh. And if he had never met Pharaoh, he would have never risen to power and fulfilled God's purpose for his life. What looked like a disruption was actually the setup for something greater. Some of you are experiencing unusual disruptions right now. Doors are closing. People you trusted are walking away. Opportunities that once flowed freely are suddenly drying up. You are wondering what is happening. Let me tell you, God is shifting you. You cannot move into the next season carrying everything from the last season. Some things, some people, and some environments were only meant to be temporary. They were necessary for your growth, but they cannot go where you are going next. And if you refuse to let go, you will find yourself stuck in a place where God no longer intends for you to be. Consider the story of Elijah and the brook of Cherith. God told Elijah to go to the brook where He provided water and sent ravens to feed him, but one day the brook dried up. Now Elijah could have panicked. He could have thought, God, did you abandon me? But no, when the brook dried up, it was a sign that God had another place for him. If the brook had never dried up, Elijah would have stayed in a place where his provision had expired. Some of you are sitting by a dried up brook, mourning what used to be, instead of recognizing that God is calling you to move forward. When God disrupts your life, it is never to harm you, it is to prepare you. He is stretching your faith, pulling you out of your comfort zone and making room for the greater blessing. But you must trust Him. You must stop clinging to expired places. You must stop praying for Him to restore something He is trying to remove. Instead, ask Him, Lord, what are you making room for? What are you preparing me for? Because every disruption is an announcement that something greater is on the way. So, my friends, do not resist the shaking. Do not fight what God is shifting. When things start moving unexpectedly, don't let fear grip you. Instead, lift your hands and say, Lord, I trust you. I may not understand it, but I trust that you are making room for something greater. Because when God is about to give you something big, he always begins with a divine disruption. There comes a moment in life when everything around you feels the same, yet something inside you begins to shift. The things that once satisfied you no longer do. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel empty. The place where you once felt comfortable now feels restrictive. You can't quite explain it, but there's a deep restlessness in your spirit. You are being stirred, pulled, and stretched in ways you never expected. Let me tell you, this is not a mistake. This is not an accident. It is a sign that God is preparing you for something greater. Whenever God is about to elevate you, he will make you uncomfortable where you are. That discomfort is divine. It is a sign that your current place has expired. Just like a baby outgrowing the womb, you can no longer stay where you are because what is in you is bigger than where you are. And if you try to remain in a place that no longer fits, you will suffocate your own destiny. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his family, and everything familiar to go to a land he would show him. Can you imagine how Abraham must have felt? He had built a life where he was, yet suddenly he felt a call to something more. God didn't give him all the details, he just gave him a promise. But that promise created a restlessness. Abraham could have ignored it. He could have convinced himself that staying was easier. But if he had stayed where he was comfortable, he would have missed the blessing that was waiting for him in the land of promise. This is what many people struggle with. They feel the pull. They sense the shift, but they try to suppress it. They tell themselves, maybe I'm just overthinking. Maybe I should just be grateful for where I am. And yes, gratitude is important, but gratitude should never keep you bound to a place God is calling you out of. Some of you are in places that no longer align with your destiny, but you stay because it's familiar. You stay because it's predictable. You stay because it's comfortable. But comfort is the enemy of growth. Every great move of God in a person's life starts with a moment of divine restlessness. Look at Moses. He grew up in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by wealth, privilege, and luxury. He had everything a person could want, yet deep inside he felt out of place. He knew he was called to something more. That restlessness led him on a journey that positioned him to deliver an entire nation. If he had ignored that feeling, if he had forced himself to stay in the palace just because it was comfortable, he would have never fulfilled his purpose. Some of you are feeling restless because you were never meant to settle. You were never meant to stay in a place that no longer challenges you, no longer stretches you, no longer pushes you toward your destiny. That restlessness is a divine alarm clock telling you it's time to move. But the danger is if you ignore it for too long, you will become stuck. You will become complacent. And what was once a temporary season will become a lifetime of unfulfilled potential. This is why you must be sensitive to the voice of God. When he starts stirring your spirit, don't silence him. When he starts making you uncomfortable, don't fight it. He is preparing you for more. And sometimes that means making where you are unbearable so that you will have no choice but to step into the next level. When an eagle is ready for its young to fly, it begins to make the nest uncomfortable. The mother eagle starts removing the soft feathers and padding, exposing the rough edges beneath. Why? Because as long as the nest is comfortable, the baby eagle will never learn to fly. The discomfort forces it to spread its wings and take a leap. Some of you are feeling the discomfort of a shifting nest. Things that once felt secure are no longer providing peace. That's not the enemy. That's God pushing you to fly. So don't resist the restlessness. Don't ignore the stirring in your spirit. That uneasy feeling is not confusion, it is confirmation. It is God's way of letting you know that where you are is no longer enough for where He is taking you. He is calling you to something greater, and the question is, will you answer? When God is about to give you something big, He will make sure you can no longer settle for less. Whenever you are on the verge of stepping into something great, you will face resistance. It is inevitable. The moment you decide to move forward, the moment you embrace the calling on your life, the moment you say yes to what God has for you, opposition will arise. Do not be surprised when people suddenly turn against you. Do not be alarmed when challenges appear out of nowhere. The enemy does not attack what is not a threat. If you are facing unusual resistance, it is because you are carrying something valuable. Look at David. The moment he was anointed to be king, opposition came. Before that, he was just a shepherd boy, unnoticed and unbothered. But as soon as the oil touched his head, his journey was met with obstacles. Saul, the very man he once served, became his enemy. He was hunted, falsely accused, and forced into hiding. But why? Because destiny attracts warfare. When God sets you apart, you become a target. But listen carefully. The attack is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that you are stepping into something great. Some of you are wondering why things have suddenly become difficult. You were moving forward, and then all of a sudden, everything seems to be working against you. Doors that were once open are now shut. People who once supported you are now criticizing you. Opportunities that seemed certain have now disappeared. You are asking God, what is happening? Let me tell you, this is confirmation, not condemnation. The resistance you are facing is proof that you are on the right path. Look at Nehemiah. He was called to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. As soon as he began the work, opposition came. Sanballat and Tobiah ridiculed him, plotted against him, and tried to stop the work. But Nehemiah did not stop. He understood that if the enemy was fighting him, it meant he was doing something significant. Some of you are facing enemies because you are building something that threatens the kingdom of darkness. The opposition is not about where you are. It is about where you are going. The enemy sees your future and he is afraid of what you will become. This is why you cannot afford to be discouraged. Too many people give up when the battle gets tough. They start questioning if they heard God correctly. They start doubting their assignment. They think, maybe I should just go back to what was easy. But hear me today. Resistance is a sign to keep going, not to turn back. If David had given up when Saul pursued him, he would have never become king. If Nehemiah had stopped building because of the threats, the wall would have never been completed. If Joseph had given up in the pit, he would have never made it to the palace. Every great assignment comes with great opposition. Some of you are in a season where the pressure is intense. You feel like everything is coming against you. But I want you to understand something. Pressure is an indication that promotion is near. When a baby is about to be born, the mother experiences the most intense pressure and pain. That pain is not a sign of death. It is a sign that something new is about to be birthed. The same is true in your life. The struggle you are facing right now is not your end. It is the beginning of something greater. So do not be discouraged. Do not retreat. Do not allow fear to make you abandon what God has called you to do. The enemy would not be fighting you this hard if you were not on the verge of something big. Stand firm. Stay in prayer. Keep building. Keep moving forward. Because when God is about to give you something big, resistance is proof that you are getting closer. When God is preparing to take you to a new level, He will introduce the right people into your life. Destiny is too big to be fulfilled alone. No great assignment is ever accomplished in isolation. Every person that God elevates, He connects to the right individuals, people who will help them step into their purpose. But here's the key. Not everyone who is in your life right now is meant to go where you are going. When God is about to do something big, He will bring new divine connections and at the same time remove relationships that no longer serve His purpose for you. Look at David. Before he stepped into his destiny, God connected him with Jonathan. Jonathan was the son of King Saul, the very man trying to kill David. Yet, he became David's protector and friend. Jonathan saw the anointing on David's life and helped him navigate the challenges of being called to something great. But notice, David did not go looking for Jonathan. God orchestrated the connection. Some of you are trying to force relationships that are not part of your next season. And at the same time, you may be overlooking the divine connections that God is bringing into your life. You must understand that divine connections are not about convenience. They are about purpose. When God assigns people to your life, they come with a mission. Some will pour wisdom into you. Some will open doors for you. Some will sharpen you, correct you, and challenge you to grow. And some will simply believe in you when no one else does. But you have to be discerning. Not everyone who smiles in your face is sent by God. Some people come as distractions. Some connections look good, but are actually designed to pull you away from your purpose. This is why discernment is crucial. Just because someone is in your life now does not mean they are assigned to your future. Look at Joseph. When he was in prison, he met the cupbearer of Pharaoh. That connection seemed insignificant at the time, but later it was that very man who mentioned Joseph's name to Pharaoh and positioned him for promotion. Some of you have divine connections in your life right now, but because they don't look the way you expected, you are ignoring them. Be careful not to dismiss the people that God has strategically placed around you. The person who holds the key to your next level may not come in the package you expect. But just as God brings the right people, he also removes the wrong ones. When Jesus was about to step into his full assignment, even he had to separate himself from certain people. The crowd followed him, but only the 12 were close to him. And even among the 12, there were 3, Peter, James, and John, who were given access to moments that the others were not. Why? Because not everyone can handle the weight of your calling. Some people only love you at your current level. They are comfortable with who you are now, but they cannot handle who you are becoming. That is why when God is elevating you, some relationships will naturally fall away. Some of you are holding on to people who have already exited your life. You are mourning friendships that God removed. You are trying to reopen doors that he has closed. Let me tell you, if someone left your life in this season, do not chase them. If they were meant to be part of your destiny, they would still be here. God does not make mistakes. If he allowed a relationship to end, it is because he has something better aligned with where you are going. You must be willing to embrace divine connections, even when they challenge you. Some people in your life are sent to push you, not just to comfort you. They will speak truth, even when it's hard to hear. They will hold you accountable. They will stretch your vision beyond what you thought was possible. These are the people you must value because they are sent by God to help you step into something greater. So, my friends, as God prepares to bless you, stay aware of who he is bringing into your life and who he is removing. Pray for discernment. Recognize that every connection is either pushing you toward your destiny or pulling you away from it. Be ready to let go of expired relationships and embrace the ones that God is sending. Because when God is about to give you something big, he always aligns you with the right people. Whenever God is preparing to give you something big, he will require a new level of faith. The blessing you are about to receive is not ordinary. So the faith required to step into it cannot be ordinary either. Many people pray for increase, but they do not understand that increase comes with a demand. When God shifts you to a greater level, he will always stretch your faith beyond what you thought was possible. Faith is the currency of the kingdom. It is the bridge between where you are and where God is taking you. If you can see it, if you can control it, if you can figure it out on your own, then it does not require faith. But when God is about to bless you with something that is bigger than you, he will put you in a position where faith is the only option. Some of you are in situations right now where nothing makes sense. You are trying to understand what God is doing, but He is not giving you all the details. That is because faith does not require details. Faith requires trust. Look at Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his family, and everything familiar to go to a land that He would show him. Notice, God did not tell him the destination. He only told him to start walking. Imagine the kind of faith that required. Abraham had to move before he saw the full picture. Some of you are waiting for God to show you the entire plan before you take a step. But faith does not work that way. If you can see everything ahead of time, then it is not faith, it is just confirmation. True faith moves even when the outcome is unknown. Some of you are in a place where God is asking you to trust Him in ways you never have before. He is asking you to step into something that feels too big, too uncertain, too overwhelming. You are looking at your resources and they don't seem enough. You are looking at your qualifications and they don't seem sufficient. But let me remind you, if God called you to it, He has already made provision for it. Your job is not to figure out how it will happen. Your job is to trust that it will happen. Look at Peter. One day he was in a boat with the other disciples and he saw Jesus walking on water. Peter said, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come." Jesus gave him one word, "Come." And with that one word, Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on water. But watch this. The water did not turn to solid ground before he stepped out. It was still water. It was still unstable. Peter had to step out while the circumstances were still uncertain. Some of you are waiting for everything to be perfect before you move. You are waiting for conditions to be right before you obey. But faith does not wait for stability. Faith moves despite the instability. Faith moves despite the instability. This is why so many people never step into the fullness of what God has for them. They want the miracle, but they do not want to take the risk. They want the blessing, but they do not want to leave their comfort zone. They want the next level, but they do not want to move forward unless they can see every step of the way. But hear me today. God is not going to show you everything. He will give you enough for the next step, and He expects you to trust Him with the rest. Some of you are at a crossroads right now. God has placed something big in front of you, but you are hesitating. You are asking, "Lord, what if it doesn't work? What if I fail? What if I don't have enough?" But I want you to ask a different question. What if it does work? What if God comes through? What if this step of faith leads you into the greatest blessing of your life? You cannot allow fear to keep you in the boat when God is calling you to walk on water. You cannot allow doubt to rob you of the promise that is waiting on the other side of your faith. The next level requires that you believe bigger, trust deeper, and step out even when you do not have all the answers. So, my friends, if you are feeling stretched right now, if God is asking you to believe for something that seems impossible, do not be afraid. That stretching is a sign that something great is ahead. Because when God is about to give you something big, He will always require a new level of faith. Whenever God is about to bless you with something big, He will test your obedience. Not because He doesn't know your heart, but because obedience is the key that unlocks the door to your next season. Many people pray for breakthroughs, increase, and elevation, but they don't realize that every great blessing comes with a test of obedience. God will always require you to take a step of faith before He releases what He has promised. Look at Abraham. God gave him a son, Isaac, after years of waiting. This child was not just any child. He was the fulfillment of God's promise, the seed through which nations would be born. But then God did something unusual. He told Abraham to take Isaac to the mountain and sacrifice him. Imagine the weight of that moment. God was asking him to lay down the very thing he had prayed for, the very thing that was supposed to be part of his destiny. Yet, without hesitation, Abraham obeyed. He took Isaac up the mountain, trusting that God would provide, and just as he was about to follow through, God stopped him and provided a ram in the bush. Now, here's the key. God never intended for Abraham to lose Isaac. The test was never about the sacrifice, it was about the obedience. Would Abraham be willing to trust God even when the instruction didn't make sense? Would he obey even when it cost him something? And because Abraham passed the test, God blessed him beyond measure, making him the father of many nations. Some of you are in a season where God is asking you to obey him in ways that challenge your logic. He is asking you to step away from certain relationships, but you don't understand why. He is telling you to give something up, but you feel like you need it. He is leading you to do something that makes no sense in the natural, and you are struggling because you cannot see the outcome. But hear me today. Obedience always precedes the blessing. If you wait until you understand, you will miss what God has for you. Look at Peter. One day, Jesus told him to cast his net into the deep after he had been fishing all night and caught nothing. Now, Peter was a professional fisherman. He knew how fishing worked, and he knew that casting the net again seemed pointless. But instead of relying on his own understanding, he obeyed. And because of his obedience, he caught so many fish that his boat began to sink. What if Peter had refused? What if he had allowed logic to override faith? He would have missed the miracle. Some of you are delaying your own breakthrough because you are questioning what God has already instructed. You are waiting for more confirmation, waiting for the conditions to be right, waiting for it to make sense. But let me tell you, delayed obedience is disobedience. When God tells you to move, you must move. When he tells you to let go, you must let go. When he tells you to step out, you must step out, because on the other side of your obedience is the very thing you have been praying for. Look at the story of the Israelites. God promised them the land of Canaan, but before they could enter, they had to obey his instructions. When they reached the Jordan River, God told the priests to step into the water before it parted, not once it was dry before. They had to get their feet wet first. It was only after they obeyed that the waters moved and made way for them to cross. Some of you are waiting for the water to part before you step, but God is saying, step first, and then I will make a way. This is where many people miss their breakthrough. They pray for a miracle, but they refuse to follow the instruction that comes with it. Every blessing in the Bible is tied to an instruction. The woman with the issue of blood had to push through the crowd and touch Jesus' garment. Naaman had to dip himself in the river 7 times. The widow at Zarephath had to bake a cake for Elijah before her oil and flour multiplied. God's blessings always require action. So I ask you today, what has God been asking you to do? What instruction has he given that you have been hesitating to obey? Is it a business he told you to start? A person he told you to forgive? A move he told you to make? Whatever it is, do not let fear, doubt, or logic keep you from stepping into your promise. Because when God is about to give you something big, he will always test your obedience first. Whenever God is about to give you something big, he will refine your character. Because the blessing he has prepared for you is not just about receiving, it is about sustaining. Too many people pray for promotion, increase, and open doors, but they do not realize that what you gain by talent, you must sustain by character. God does not just want to bless you, he wants to prepare you for the blessing. And that preparation often comes in the form of refining. Look at Joseph. God gave him a dream when he was young. He saw himself in a position of great authority. But before Joseph ever sat on the throne, he went through a process of refining. He was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. Every step of his journey seemed to take him further from the promise, but in reality, it was preparing him for it. Because had Joseph become a ruler before he learned humility, wisdom, and patience, he would not have been able to handle the weight of the position. Some of you are asking, God, why is it taking so long? Why am I facing so many trials? But what if the delay is not denial? What if it is preparation? God will always test your heart before he gives you the platform. He will develop integrity in you before he gives you influence. Because the blessing that is coming is too great for an unprepared vessel. Many people have been elevated too soon, and because their character was not refined. We have seen it in history. Talented individuals who had the gift but not the discipline, the opportunity but not the wisdom, the success but not the humility, and as quickly as they rose, they fell. That is why God is taking his time with you. He is shaping you, molding you, and removing anything that would compromise your destiny. Look at David. Before he became king, he spent years in the wilderness. He was anointed, but he was not yet appointed. Why? Because he had to go through a process. He had to learn how to lead before he ruled. He had to learn how to serve before he commanded. And most importantly, he had to develop a heart that could carry the weight of the throne. Some of you are in a wilderness season right now. It feels like nothing is happening. It feels like the promise is far away. But this is not a wasted season. It is a preparation season. God refines character through challenges. He allows certain situations to expose what is in you. If there is impatience, he will put you in a situation that requires patience. If there is pride, he will allow circumstances that humble you. If there is doubt, he will place you in a position where faith is the only option, because he is not just interested in what you do, he is interested in who you become. This is why some doors have not opened yet. It is not that God is withholding them from you. It is that he is waiting for you to be ready. Look at Moses. He was called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, but before he stepped into that calling, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. God had to develop him because at first, Moses tried to fulfill his calling in his own strength. He killed an Egyptian, thinking that was the way to deliver his people, but he was not yet ready. His character had to be refined before he could carry out his assignment. And when the time came, he led with wisdom, patience, and power, not in his own strength, but in God's. Some of you are frustrated because you feel like you are ready, but God is still holding you in the refining process. You feel like you have been overlooked, delayed, or forgotten. But let me tell you, God does not promote prematurely. If he is taking his time, it is because he is making sure you can handle what is coming. The worst thing that can happen is to receive a blessing you are not prepared to sustain. So do not despise the refining season. Do not resist the process. If God is dealing with your heart, let him. If he is stretching you, surrender. If he is delaying something, trust that it is for your good. Because when God is about to give you something big, he will always refine your character first. My friends, I want you to understand that when God is about to give you something big, he does not just drop it into your hands. He prepares you for it. He will shift your environment, allow challenges to shape you, stretch your faith, test your obedience, and refine your character. Not because he is trying to make things difficult, but because he is making you ready. What he has for you is greater than you can imagine, but greatness requires process. So do not be discouraged by what you are going through. Do not be afraid of the stretching, the shifting, or the waiting. Every delay is divine. Every test has a purpose. Every challenge is a setup for what's coming next. Hold on, stay faithful, and trust that what God has started in you, he will complete. Because when the time is right, no force in heaven or earth can stop what he has planned for you. I pray that you walk boldly into your next season, knowing that God is working behind the scenes for your good. Keep your faith strong, your heart pure, and your eyes fixed on the promise. The best is yet to come. Good luck, stay blessed, and thank you.